The starship was larger than anything Kang Ti-ho had ever seen. It hung in the darkness of space like a floating mountain, its surface covered with strange patterns that glowed with soft purple light. This was the Starborn Throne, the royal flagship of the Veloran Empire, and today it would host the first real peace talks between humans and the most powerful alien species in the known galaxy. Ti-ho stood at the window of the human shuttle as it approached the massive ship. His reflection stared back at him, a 34-year-old man with tired eyes and nervous hands. He was not a soldier or a politician. He was a translator and cultural expert, chosen for this mission because he had spent years studying Veloran language and customs. But studying something in books was very different from living it. The shuttle passed through a shimmering energy barrier and entered a docking bay that could have held a small city. Veloran guards stood in perfect lines on both sides, their tall bodies completely still. They were an impressive species, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with skin that looked like polished stone in shades of gray and purple. Their faces had no soft features. Sharp angles, compound eyes that reflected light like broken mirrors, and mouths filled with small pointed teeth. They did not smile. Ti-ho had learned that Velorans considered showing teeth to be a sign of aggression. The human delegation was small. There was Ambassador Park Yuna, a calm woman in her 50s who had negotiated with dozens of alien species. There were 2 military advisors, 3 scientists, and Ti-ho. 7 humans aboard a ship that held thousands of Velorans. It felt like being a drop of water in an ocean. As they walked through the corridors, Ti-ho noticed how cold everything was. The air was dry and carried a faint smell like burning metal. The walls were smooth and bare, with no decorations or colors. Everything was built for function, not comfort. This was how Velorans lived. They saw beauty in efficiency, not in art. The throne room was at the heart of the ship. 2 massive doors slid open, revealing a chamber so large that Ti-ho could barely see the ceiling. In the center, on a platform of black stone, sat the queen of the Veloran Empire. Queen Ilithara was different from her soldiers. She was taller, nearly 9 feet, and her skin had a blue-silver color that seemed to glow from within. Her forearms were decorated with bands of dark metal, and her compound eyes were larger and more complex than any Veloran Ti-ho had seen before. She wore no crown, but she did not need one. Her presence alone made it clear who ruled here. "Humans," she said. Her voice was deep and echoed through the chamber like the sound of wind through a canyon. "You have come to speak of peace." Ambassador Park bowed her head slightly. "We have, Your Majesty. The United Coalition of Earth wishes to end the conflict between our peoples. We believe there is more to gain from friendship than from war." The Queen did not respond immediately. Her eyes moved slowly across each member of the human group, studying them like a scientist studying insects. When her gaze reached Ti-ho, he felt his heart beat faster. Those eyes held no warmth, no emotion. They were calculating, measuring, judging. "We shall see," the Queen finally said. "The negotiations will begin tomorrow. Until then, you will be given quarters aboard this ship. Do not wander. Do not touch anything. My guards will be watching." It was not a warm welcome, but Ti-ho had not expected one. The Velorans had spent the last 10 years treating humans as lesser beings, barely worthy of attention. They had not attacked Earth, but they had made it very clear that they saw humanity as primitive and emotional. To them, humans were like children who had somehow learned to build starships. That night Ti-ho could not sleep. His quarters were comfortable enough, but the silence of the ship was strange. On human ships there was always some noise. Engines humming, people talking, music playing somewhere. Here there was nothing, just cold, empty quiet. He was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling when he heard it. A sound, high and thin like the cry of a small animal in pain. It came from somewhere far away, muffled by walls and distance, but it was unmistakable. Someone was crying. Ti-ho sat up. Velorans did not cry. He knew this from his studies. They communicated through pheromones and precise vibration patterns, not through vocal sounds like humans did. So what was making that noise? The crying continued. It rose and fell, sometimes fading to almost nothing, then growing loud again. It sounded desperate. It sounded afraid. T-Ho got out of bed and walked to his door. He pressed his ear against the cold metal and listened. The sound was definitely coming from deeper within the ship. He knew he was not supposed to leave his quarters, but something about that cry made his chest feel tight. It was the sound of someone who needed help. He opened the door slightly and looked outside. The corridor was empty. The Veloran guards were nowhere to be seen. Perhaps they did not expect the humans to disobey so quickly. T-Ho stepped out and walked toward the sound. The crying led him through a maze of identical hallways. He moved carefully, hiding in shadows whenever he heard footsteps, always following that thin, painful sound. Finally, he reached a section of the ship that looked different from the rest. The walls here were smoother, and the doors were decorated with symbols he did not recognize. This was the royal section. Through a half-open door, T-Ho saw something that made him stop. Queen Ilithara stood in the middle of a room filled with glowing screens and medical equipment. Her back was to the door, her 4 arms hanging at her sides. She was completely still, but something about her posture was different. The cold, powerful ruler he had seen in the throne room was gone. In her place was a figure that looked lost, broken. In the center of the room, inside a clear container filled with soft light, was a baby. A tiny Veloran, no bigger than a human newborn, with pale lavender skin and 4 small arms. Her eyes were closed and her mouth was open, and she was crying. That was the sound T-Ho had been following. The princess of the Veloran Empire was screaming in pain, and no one knew how to help her. A physician approached the queen. "We have tried everything, Majesty. Her body shows no signs of illness. All her vital readings are normal. We do not understand why she cries." The queen did not turn around. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "She has been crying for 16 hours. My daughter is suffering, and you tell me you do not understand." "The princess is healthy," the physician said carefully. "There is no logical reason for her distress." T-Ho watched from the shadows as the queen's hands began to shake. It was a small movement, almost invisible, but he saw it. The most powerful being in the galaxy was trembling because her baby would not stop crying. Something in his chest shifted. He thought of his sister back on Earth, of the nights she had called him in tears because her daughter would not sleep. He remembered packing the floor with his niece in his arms, singing old songs until she finally calmed down. Humans knew something about crying babies. Maybe he could help. But first, he needed to find a way to offer that help without getting himself killed. He stepped back into the shadows and began to think. The next morning, the peace negotiations were supposed to begin. The human delegation gathered in a large meeting room, their datapads ready, their speeches prepared. But the Veloran seats remained empty. Ambassador Park waited with growing concern. "This is not a good sign," she said quietly to T-Ho. "The Velorans are never late. They consider punctuality to be sacred." T-Ho knew why they were delayed. He had returned to his quarters after seeing the queen, but he had not slept. The sound of that baby crying had followed him into his dreams. Even now, hours later, he could still hear it if he listened carefully. The walls of the ship were thick, but that cry was strong enough to travel through metal and stone. Finally, a Veloran official entered the room. His face showed no expression, but there was tension in the way he moved. "The negotiations are postponed," he announced. "The Queen requires time to attend to a personal matter. You will remain in your quarters until further notice." The human delegation exchanged worried looks. Ambassador Park stood up. "May I ask what has happened? Is there anything we can do to help?" The official stared at her with his compound eyes. "Humans cannot help with Veloran matters. Return to your quarters. You will be summoned when the Queen is ready." And just like that, they were dismissed. Back in his small room, T-Ho paced the floor. He could still hear the crying, fainter now but still present. The princess had been wailing for 16 hours when he saw her last night. Now it was morning. That meant the baby had been crying for at least 20 hours without rest. He thought about what he knew of Veloran child-rearing. Their species did not believe in physical contact with their young. Bobbies were placed in special pods immediately after birth and raised by machines. The pods provided food, warmth, and protection. Everything a child needed to survive. But survival and comfort were not the same thing. Human bobbies needed more than food and warmth. They needed to be touched. They needed to hear heartbeats and feel arms around them. They needed love. T-Ho wondered if Veloran bobbies were any different. Hours passed. The crying continued. Sometimes it grew louder as if the baby was finding new strength to scream. Sometimes it faded to weak, tired whimpers, but it never stopped completely. Around midday, T-Ho heard movement in the corridor outside his room. Heavy footsteps, many voices speaking in the clicking language of the Velorans. He pressed his ear to the door and listened. "The healers from the outer colonies have arrived," someone was saying. "They brought new equipment." "It will not help," another voice replied. "Nothing helps. The princess is not sick. There is simply something wrong with her, something broken inside." "Do not let the queen hear you say such things." "The queen knows it is true. She has barely left the nursery. She watches her daughter cry and can do nothing. I have never seen her like this." The footsteps faded and T-Ho stepped back from the door. His mind was racing. The Velorans had brought healers from across their empire, and still the baby cried. They were looking for a physical problem because that was how they understood the universe. Everything could be measured and analyzed. Everything had a logical solution. But some problems were not logical. Some problems came from the heart. T-Ho made a decision. It was probably a stupid decision, one that could get him thrown out of an airlock or locked in a prison for the rest of his life. But he could not stand here doing nothing while a baby suffered. He left his quarters and began walking toward the royal section. The guards stopped him 3 times. Each time he told them he had a message for the queen regarding the peace negotiations. Each time they scanned him for weapons, found nothing dangerous, and let him pass. They were too distracted by the crisis to question him carefully. When he reached the medical wing, the scene was chaos. Dozens of Veloran physicians and scientists filled the corridors, their voices rising in argument. Holographic displays showed complex medical data. Machines beeped and hummed. And underneath it all, like a thread of pain running through everything, was the sound of the princess crying. T-Ho pushed his way through the crowd until he reached the door to the nursery. 2 massive guards stood on either side, their weapons ready. "I need to speak with the queen," T-Ho said. The guards did not move. "The queen sees no one. Tell her the human translator has a suggestion about the princess." One of the guards made a sound that might have been a laugh. A human. What could a human possibly know about Veloran children? "Please," T-Ho said, "just tell her. If she says no, I will leave." The guards looked at each other. One of them touched a panel on the wall and spoke quietly into a communicator. There was a long pause. Then, to T-Ho's surprise, the door slid open. The nursery was quieter than he expected. The medical machines were still here, but they had been pushed to the edges of the room. In the center, the clear pod containing the princess glowed with soft light. The baby inside was still crying, but her voice was weaker now. She was exhausting herself. Queen Ilithara stood beside the pod. She did not look at T-Ho when he entered. Her eyes remained fixed on her daughter. "You are the translator," she said. Her voice was flat, empty of emotion. "Park's assistant." "Yes, Your Majesty." "My guards tell me you claim to have a suggestion." She finally turned to look at him. Her compound eyes were different now. The calculating coldness was still there, but behind it was something else. Fear. Desperation. I have summoned the greatest healers in my empire, scientists who have studied biology for centuries, and you, a human, think you can help where they have failed. Tiho swallowed hard. I do not know if I can help, but I have an idea that your healers might not have considered. Speaker. On Earth, when bobbies cry like this, when they cry for hours and nothing seems to be wrong with them, we have a word for it. We call it colic sometimes, but often it is something simpler. The baby is not sick. The baby is lonely. The queen tilted her head. Lonely. Human bobbies need physical contact. They need to feel safe. When they are born, they come from a warm, close place inside their mother. The world outside is cold and strange. They cry because they want to be held. They want to feel a heartbeat. They want to know they are not alone. A long silence filled the room. The queen stared at Tiho as if he had started speaking a language she did not understand. Physical contact, she repeated slowly. You are suggesting that I touch my daughter. Yes. That is not how Velorans raise their young. We keep our infants in regulated environments. We protect them from contamination. We give them everything they need to grow strong. You give them everything they need to survive, Tiho said gently. But perhaps survival is not enough. Perhaps she needs something more. The queen turned back to look at her daughter. The baby's crying had faded to weak gasps. She had been screaming for so long that her tiny body was giving up. My people would think me weak, the queen said quietly. A queen who holds her child like a human. Your people are not here right now, Tiho replied. Only you and your daughter, and she is suffering. The queen closed her compound eyes. For a moment, she stood perfectly still. Then she reached out with one of her 4 arms and touched the surface of the pod. I do not know how, she whispered. I do not know how to hold a child. No Veloran has done such a thing in 10,000 years. Tiho stepped forward. Then let me show you. The queen's eyes opened. She looked at him with a mixture of shock and something that might have been hope. You would hold her. If you allow it, Tiho said. I have held many human bobbies. I know how to be gentle. Let me try, please. What do you have to lose? The queen looked at her crying daughter. Then she looked at Tiho, this small, strange creature from a primitive world. Finally, slowly, she nodded. Try. Tiho approached the pod slowly, aware that every eye in the room was watching him. The queen had stepped back, her 4 arms crossed in front of her chest. Her compound eyes followed his every movement. Behind him, he could feel the stares of the Veloran physicians who had gathered at the doorway. They were silent now, their arguments forgotten. A human was about to touch their princess. It was unthinkable. The pod was made of a clear material that felt warm under his fingers. Inside, the baby lay on a soft surface that glowed with gentle light. She was so small, even smaller than a human newborn. Her pale lavender skin was almost translucent, showing faint lines of darker purple beneath. Her 4 arms were curled against her chest, and her eyes were squeezed shut as weak cries escaped her tiny mouth. Tiho looked at the queen. How do I open it? The queen hesitated. For a moment he thought she would change her mind. Then she gestured to a panel on the side of the pod. Touch the blue symbol. It will open. Tiho pressed the symbol. The clear material dissolved like mist, and suddenly there was nothing between him and the princess. He could feel the warmth coming from the lighting system, smell the faint scent of something sweet and clean. The baby's crying grew louder now that the barrier was gone. It echoed through the nursery, a sound of pure distress. He took a deep breath and reached down. The princess's skin was softer than he expected. It had looked hard and smooth like her mother's, but when he touched her, it felt more like silk. She was warm, almost feverish, and her small body trembled with each cry. Tiho slid his hands beneath her carefully. One hand supported her back and head, the other cradled her bottom. He lifted her slowly, gently, the way his sister had taught him years ago when his niece was born. The moment she left the pod, the princess's crying changed. It did not stop, but there was a new sound in it. Confusion, perhaps, or surprise. She had spent her entire short life in that pod, surrounded by machines and artificial warmth. She had never felt human hands before. She had never felt any hands at all. T-Ho brought her to his chest. He held her close, the way humans had held their bobbies for thousands of years. Her tiny head rested just below his shoulder, close enough to feel the beating of his heart. Her four small arms moved weakly, searching for something to hold. "It is all right," T-Ho whispered. "You are safe, I am here." He began to sway gently, side to side, a motion as old as humanity itself. Back and forth, back and forth. The movement was simple, but it carried the weight of generations. Every human parent knew this dance. It was written in their bones. The princess's crying began to slow, not all at once but gradually, like a storm losing its strength. Her tiny body was still tense against his chest, but the desperate quality of her cries was fading. She was listening now, paying attention to something new. The queen made a sound. It was quiet, almost inaudible, but T-Ho heard it. When he looked at her, he saw that her hands were pressed against her mouth. Her compound eyes were wide and filled with something he had never seen on a Veloran face before. Wonder. "She is quieting," the queen whispered. "How is this possible?" "She can feel my heartbeat," T-Ho explained softly, still swaying. "Human hearts beat differently from Veloran hearts. It is a rhythm she has never heard before. But all bobbies, I think, know what a heartbeat means. It means someone is close, someone is alive, someone is holding them." The princess let out a shaky breath. Her four arms moved again, and this time they found purchase. Two of them wrapped around T-Ho's finger, gripping tightly. The other two pressed against his chest, feeling the movement of his breathing. "She is holding you," the queen said. Her voice cracked slightly. "She has never held anything before." T-Ho looked down at the tiny creature in his arms. Her eyes were still closed, but her face was changing. The tight lines of distress were smoothing out. Her mouth had stopped forming screams. She looked almost peaceful. "May I try something else?" he asked the queen. "Yes, anything." T-Ho began to hum. It was a simple melody, one his grandmother had sung to him when he was a boy. He did not remember all the words, but the tune was burned into his memory. Soft and slow, rising and falling like waves on a shore. The princess's grip on his finger tightened for a moment. Then, slowly, her body relaxed. The tension drained from her small form like water from a broken cup. Her breathing became deep and steady. She was falling asleep. T-Ho kept humming, afraid to stop. The melody filled the nursery, strange and foreign against the cold metal walls. The Veloran physicians watched in stunned silence. Some of them were recording everything with their devices. Others simply stared, their compound eyes reflecting the soft light of the room. Minutes passed. The princess's breathing became slower and slower until it was barely perceptible. Her four arms went limp, but two of them still held T-Ho's finger. She did not want to let go, even in sleep. The queen moved closer. She approached T-Ho so slowly that he almost did not notice until she was standing right beside him. She looked down at her daughter, her face unreadable. "She sleeps," the queen said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "She has not slept since she was born. The physicians said her sleep cycles were abnormal. They gave her medicines, adjusted her pod settings. Nothing worked. And now she sleeps in the arms of a human." "She was not sick," T-Ho said. "She was just lonely." The queen was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, more vulnerable. "I did not understand. Our people have raised children this way for 10,000 years. We believed it made them strong, independent, free from the weakness of emotional attachment." She paused, looking at the sleeping princess. "But she was suffering. My daughter was suffering, and I did not know how to help her." "You could not have known," T-Ho said gently. "Your people do not have the same instincts that humans do. We evolved differently. We survived by staying close to each other, by forming bonds, by touching and holding the ones we love. It is not weakness. It is just how we are built. The queen reached out with one of her forearms. Her clawed fingers stopped just short of touching her daughter's head. She seemed afraid. "I have never touched her," she admitted. "From the moment she was born, she was placed in the pod. The physician said it was the safest place for her. I watched her through the glass, but I never—" Her voice trailed off. "Would you like to hold her?" Tiho asked. The queen's eyes widened. "I do not know how I might hurt her." "You will not, I can show you." For a long moment the queen did not move. Then, slowly, she extended her forearms. They trembled slightly as Tiho gently transferred the sleeping princess from his chest to her mother's embrace. The princess stirred briefly. Her small face scrunched up, and Tiho feared she would start crying again. But then she settled against her mother's chest, her forearms reaching up to grip the bands of metal that decorated the queen's arms. And the queen made a sound that Tiho would never forget. It was not a word. It was not a cry. It was something between a gasp and a moan, a sound of pure emotion breaking through walls that had stood for centuries. The queen pulled her daughter closer, her forearms wrapping around the tiny body, and for the first time in 10,000 years, a Veloran mother held her child. The physicians at the door were completely silent. Some of them had stopped recording. They simply watched, witnessing something that had not happened in their civilization for hundreds of generations. Tiho stepped back quietly, giving the queen space. He had done what he came to do. The rest was up to her. The queen looked up at him, her compound eyes shimmering with something that might have been tears, if Velorans could cry. "Thank you," she said. The words seemed to cost her great effort, as if she was not used to saying them. "Thank you, human." Tiho bowed his head. "Her name is Velith, yes, she is beautiful." The queen looked down at her sleeping daughter. "Yes," she whispered, "she is." Outside the nursery, the ship seemed to hold its breath. Word was already spreading through the corridors. The princess was sleeping. A human had helped her. Everything was about to change. The princess slept for 6 hours. During that time, the queen did not move from her spot in the nursery. She sat on a chair that the servants brought for her forearms still wrapped around her daughter, her eyes never leaving the tiny sleeping face. Tiho stayed nearby, not because he was asked to, but because the queen seemed to want him there. Several times, she looked up at him as if to confirm that he was still present. Each time, he nodded gently and remained quiet. The physicians had left. There was nothing for them to do now. The princess was not sick. She had never been sick. She had simply needed something that Veloran science could not provide. Love, touch, connection. Word spread through the ship like fire through dry grass. The human delegation heard about it first. Ambassador Park found Tiho outside the nursery and pulled him aside. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice caught between amazement and concern. "The Velorans are talking about you. Some of them look at you like you are a miracle. Others look at you like you are a threat. You need to tell me exactly what happened." Tiho explained everything. The crying, the lonely baby, the simple act of holding and humming. When he finished, Ambassador Park stared at him for a long moment. "You held their princess," she said slowly. "The heir to the most powerful empire in the galaxy. You just picked her up." "She was crying," Tiho said. It seemed so simple to him. A baby was crying, he knew how to help, so he helped. Ambassador Park shook her head, but she was smiling. "You may have just changed history, Tiho. I hope it was in a good way." When the princess woke up, she did not cry. She opened her large, luminous eyes, looked at her mother's face, and made a soft cooing sound that the queen had never heard before. It was a happy sound, a content sound. The queen looked at Tiho with those compound eyes. "She has never made that sound," she said. "I did not know she could make sounds other than crying." "She was too distressed before," Tiho explained. Bobbies communicate in many ways. Crying is how they express pain or fear or loneliness. But when they are happy, they make different sounds. Soft sounds, peaceful sounds. The queen looked back at her daughter. Slowly, carefully, she raised one clawed finger and touched the princess's cheek. The baby turned her head toward the touch, her four tiny arms reaching up. "She wants to hold your finger," Tiho said. The queen extended her finger, and the princess grabbed it with all four hands. She pulled it toward her mouth and began to gnaw on it gently with her toothless gums. For the first time in his life, Tiho saw a Veloran laugh. It was not a loud sound. It was more like a series of clicks mixed with a low hum, but it was unmistakably laughter. The queen's shoulders shook, and her compound eyes crinkled at the edges. "She is trying to eat me," the queen said. "Bobbies do that," Tiho replied with a smile. "They explore the world with their mouths. It means she trusts you." The queen looked at him. Her expression had changed completely from the cold, distant ruler he had met yesterday. There was warmth in her eyes now, gratitude, and something else that looked almost like respect. "You knew this," she said. "Humans have known this for how long?" "As long as we have existed," Tiho said. "We are not a strong species. We cannot run as fast as many animals on our planet. We do not have claws or thick skin. We survived because we stayed together. We formed groups, families, communities. We took care of each other. We held our children close because they needed us and we needed them." The queen was silent for a moment. Then she asked a question that surprised him. "Do you have children of your own?" Tiho shook his head. "No, but I have a niece, my sister's daughter. When she was born, she cried just like your daughter. My sister was so tired and scared. I helped her. I walked the floors at night holding my niece, singing to her. It took many weeks before she learned to sleep through the night." "And now, is she healthy?" "She is 5 years old now, strong and happy and full of energy. She calls me Uncle Tiho and demands that I carry her on my shoulders every time I visit." He smiled at the memory. "It is exhausting, but I love it." The queen looked down at her own daughter. The princess had fallen asleep again, still holding her mother's finger. "I want this for her," the queen said quietly. "I want her to grow strong and happy. I want her to know what it feels like to be held, to be loved." She paused and her voice became uncertain. "But I do not know how. My people have forgotten these things. We built machines to raise our children because we thought it was better, more efficient. We did not realize what we were losing." Tiho took a deep breath. What he was about to say was dangerous. It might offend the queen. It might end the peace talks before they even began, but he felt that he needed to say it. "Perhaps that is why our species have been enemies," he said carefully. "You saw us as emotional and primitive. We saw you as cold and distant, but maybe we have things to teach each other. Humans can learn efficiency and logic from Velorans. And maybe Velorans can learn something from humans too." The queen did not respond immediately. She sat in silence, looking at her daughter, thinking thoughts that Tiho could not guess. Finally, she spoke. "When I first agreed to these peace talks, I did it because my advisors told me it was strategically wise. Humanity is not a threat to us, but you are unpredictable. It was better to have peace than to waste resources watching you. That was my thinking, cold, logical." She looked up at Tiho. "But now I see that I was wrong. There is more to humanity than I understood. You are not just primitive creatures running on emotion. You have wisdom that we have lost, knowledge that we never had." She stood up slowly, still holding the sleeping princess in her arms. She stood tall, nearly 9 feet of royal power, but there was something different about her now. She seemed less like a statue and more like a living being. "The peace talks will resume tomorrow," she said. "But they will not be the same. I do not want a treaty based on strategic calculations. I want a real alliance. I want humans to teach my people what they have forgotten. I want our children to grow up knowing the warmth that you have shown my daughter." Tiho felt his heart beating faster. "Your Majesty, I am just a translator. I do not have the power to make such decisions." Then I will speak to your ambassador, Park, but I wanted to tell you first because you are the one who changed my mind." She paused. "You held my daughter when she was suffering. You sang to her. You showed her kindness when my own people could not. I will not forget this, Kang Tiho. Neither will the Veloran Empire." She walked past him, heading toward the door. Then she stopped and looked back. "Will you teach me?" she asked. "The song you sang to her, I would like to learn it." Tiho smiled. "It is a very old song from my grandmother's homeland. The words are in Korean. They are about the moon watching over children while they sleep." "Then teach me the words. I want to sing it to my daughter." And there, in the cold metal nursery of an alien starship, Tiho began to teach the queen of the Veloran Empire a Korean lullaby. Her voice was strange, clicking and humming in ways that the song was never meant to be sung. But she listened carefully, repeated each phrase, and practiced until she got it right. The princess stirred in her arms and made a soft, happy sound. Tiho thought about his grandmother, who had died years ago. He wondered what she would think if she knew that her lullaby was now being sung by an alien queen to her daughter, millions of light years from Earth. She would probably smile and say something about how music knows no borders. And she would be right. 3 days later, the peace treaty was signed. But it was not the treaty that anyone had expected. The original document had been thrown away. In its place was something new, something that would change the relationship between humans and Velorans forever. Ambassador Park stood at the center of the diplomatic hall, her hand pressed against a holographic seal. Beside her, Queen Ilithara did the same, her clawed fingers leaving marks of glowing light on the document. "With this treaty," the Queen announced, her voice echoing through the chamber, "the Veloran Empire and the United Coalition of Earth enter into a new era, not as cautious neighbors watching each other from afar, but as true allies, as partners, as teachers to one another." The Veloran officials in the room exchanged uncertain glances. Many of them did not understand what had changed. Just days ago, their queen had treated humans as primitive creatures barely worth her attention. Now she spoke of them as partners. It made no sense. But they did not question her. A Veloran queen was not questioned. Tiho stood at the back of the room, trying to stay invisible. He was still just a translator, after all. The important work was being done by ambassadors and officials who had spent their entire lives preparing for moments like this. He was happy to let them take the spotlight. But the queen had other ideas. "Before we conclude these proceedings," she said, "I wish to make a special announcement." The room fell silent. Even the human delegation looked confused. Ambassador Park glanced at Tiho with raised eyebrows. 3 days ago, my daughter, Princess Velith, was suffering. Our greatest physicians could not help her. Our most advanced technology could not solve her problem. She cried for nearly a full day without rest, and we feared that she was dying." The queen paused, letting her words settle into the silence. "Then a human helped her." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Veloran eyes turned toward the human delegation, scanning faces, trying to identify who the queen was talking about. "Kang Tiho," the queen said, "step forward." Tiho felt his face grow hot. Every eye in the room was now fixed on him. He wanted to disappear into the floor, but he forced himself to walk forward, his legs shaking slightly with each step. He stopped at the base of the platform where the queen stood. He had never felt so small in his life. "This man," the queen continued, "did what no Veloran could do. He held my daughter in his arms. He sang to her. He showed her kindness and warmth when our machines and medicine could only fail. Because of him, she sleeps peacefully now. Because of him, I have learned that there is more to life than logic and efficiency." The queen descended from the platform until she stood directly in front of Tiho. She was nearly 3 feet taller than him, and her shadow fell over him like a mountain's shade. But her eyes were not cold. They were filled with something that he had never expected to see directed at a human. Gratitude, respect, affection. Kang Ti-ho, she said formally, in recognition of your service to the Veloran Empire, I grant you the title of Royal Friend to the Crown. You will be welcomed in any Veloran territory as an honored guest. You will have the protection of our empire for the rest of your life. And should you ever need anything, you need only ask. Ti-ho did not know what to say. He managed a bow, his mind spinning. Thank you, Your Majesty. I am honored beyond words. Do not thank me, the queen said. I am the one who owes thanks. You have given my daughter a gift that cannot be measured. You have given me a gift as well. She reached out with one of her 4 arms and placed it gently on his shoulder. It was a human gesture, one she had clearly learned just for this moment. I understand now that true strength is not found only in power or technology. Sometimes it lives in a gentle hand and a quiet song. The crowd was completely silent. Many of the Velorans looked shocked. Their queen was touching a human, voluntarily, affectionately. It went against every custom their species had followed for thousands of years. But no one objected. How could they? The queen's words were true, and everyone in the room knew it. The ceremony ended shortly after. As the delegates began to leave, Ambassador Park approached Ti-ho with a wide smile on her face. Well, she said, I think you just became the most famous human in the galaxy. Ti-ho laughed nervously. I did not mean for any of this to happen. I just wanted to help a crying baby. And that is exactly why it worked, Park said. You were not trying to impress anyone or gain power. You saw someone in pain and wanted to help. That is the most human thing there is. Later that day, Ti-ho received a message on his personal datapad. It was from the Queen. The message was short, but it carried more weight than any official document. Kang Ti-ho, my daughter sleeps in my arms tonight. She makes happy sounds when I sing the song you taught me. I never knew such joy was possible. The Veloran Empire has ruled through strength and logic for 10,000 years. We believed that emotions were weakness. We were wrong. You have shown me that the greatest strength comes from love. I have already begun changes in our child-rearing practices. Veloran mothers will be encouraged to hold their children. It will take time, but one day, no Veloran baby will grow up alone in a cold machine. This is your legacy. You may not realize it, but you have changed the future of an entire civilization. My daughter will grow up knowing warmth and love because of you. And one day, when she is queen, she will remember the human who held her when she was small and scared and crying. She will remember the song you sang, and she will pass that memory to her own children. This is what you have given us. This is what humans have given the galaxy. Thank you, Kang Ti-ho. Thank you for teaching us how to love. Ti-ho read the message 3 times. Then he walked to the window of his quarters and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, his sister, his niece, his grandmother's memory, all the little things that made humans who they were, the hugs and songs and midnight walks with crying bobbies, the small, quiet acts of love that seemed so ordinary but were actually extraordinary. Humanity had come to the stars believing they were alone. They had found alien civilizations that were stronger, smarter, and more advanced in every measurable way. For a long time, they had wondered what they had to offer the universe. What could primitive humans possibly contribute to a galaxy full of wonders? Now Ti-ho knew the answer. They could offer warmth, they could offer touch, they could offer love. And that was worth more than all the technology in the universe. He thought of the princess, sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. He thought of the queen, learning to sing a Korean lullaby. He thought of all the Veloran children who would grow up differently because of what had happened on this ship. He smiled and whispered into the darkness, "Sleep well, little one, you are not alone." And somewhere in the royal chambers of the Starborn throne, a queen held her daughter close and sang a song about the moon watching over children while they slept. The words were in a language she did not fully understand, but she understood what they meant. Love knows no borders, not between nations, not between species, not between worlds. And that was enough.